Okay, everybody, welcome back to BOJ-E-BIKES. Today we're going to talk about some things that you might wish to know before you buy an e-bike. Things that, common questions that people come in here and ask about, plus things that we've discovered on our e-bike journeys. Just an accumulation of a bit of knowledge that we have here, so we're going to try to share that with you today. All right, the first thing we're going to talk about is understanding your ride, I guess. It's kind of a broad overview of like the classes and the battery size, but I'm going to start off by saying understanding your ride is understanding what you want to do on your bike or what you need to do on your bike. Are you a commuter? Are you a leisurely rider? Are you out for exercise? Are you out for no exercise? I mean, you can do all these things on your e-bike. We're starting with the classes, class 1, class 2, class 3, as defined by our federal and most state governments. Class 1 and 2, they go up to 20 miles an hour. But a class 1 bike doesn't have a throttle. A class 2 bike will add your throttle. And then a class 3 bike will allow you to pedal as fast as 28 miles an hour with motor assistance. Throttle does not take you up to 28 miles an hour. And these are the legal terms of what makes a electric bicycle still remain a bicycle and not be a motor vehicle. Most people around here, we're selling them class 2, class 3 bicycles. We do have a couple of class 1s here. The class 1s are interesting. A lot of them have smaller motors, have smaller batteries and way lighter. This Van Powers here weighs 35 pounds, which is kind of unheard of in the e-bike world to be that low for a full-size bike. But they do that with a 10 amp hour battery. They do that with a 350 watt motor. They're just not that large, and it depends on you to pedal it more. So we got your classes. The battery size is really going to pertain to how far you can go, obviously, or how fast you can go there. The faster you go, the more you'll use the battery. The slower you go, the less you'll use the battery. So it really is somebody who tailors their own ride, wants to pedal a bunch, can still get 60 miles out of a 10 amp hour battery. But if you're going to throttle constantly, you might not get 30 miles out of a 20 amp hour battery. If you're throttling at high speeds, you're going to use up the battery very quickly. It's kind of as simple as that. But you are the one who's going to tailor how far you go. The other thing I'll mention, I'll stop with the batteries there. We could go all day on that. But the motor size, as well as the motor placement. Again, we got smaller motors, we've got larger motors, but the motor placement in the hub drive is going to be an easier ride for most people. You don't have to shift if you don't want to, but it's not quite that efficient. We've got the mid-drive motor. This one goes through the gears here. It's a 500 watt mid-drive motor, but you can see the motor's up here. It goes through the chain, goes through the gears. It is going to be a little more efficient, and it's going to get a lot more torque because you're able to use those giant gears to do some hill climbing. You're going to see the torque numbers double when you drop to the lower gears, the bigger cogs. There are benefits to that. The mid-drive motor doesn't have, it's a regular rear tire. It's a lot easier for you to change on the road, things like that. However, now you got to shift constantly too, and if you don't want to shift constantly, if you want to throttle around only, you're not going to appreciate having a manual transmission on your bicycle, I think. On the other end, if you're going to look for performance, if you're going to look to mountain bike, those kind of things, a mid-drive is something you should consider. You're going to be shifting constantly, but you're going to be able to climb a lot easier and perhaps have a little bit more control over your bike in technical situations. So with all that in mind, depending on what your riding style is, you're going to have to filter through that. All right, these are things that are often overlooked: componentry, comfort, safety, security, along those lines here. The first thing I'll talk about are the brakes. There are many different brake brands out there, but there's basically two types of brakes. You have mechanical brakes and you have hydraulic brakes. Your mechanical brakes are right here on this bike. I'll wheel it up. There is a wire leading from this lever and all the way down. Here's the front brake, and it pulls the brake shut, and it's done with a metal wire. However, they come with adjusters here and adjusters down here. Well, that's because it needs to be adjusted throughout its life. Your wire, every time you do an emergency brake and you pull real hard, you're stretching that wire a little bit. A mechanical brake is a very adequate brake and can stop an e-bike no problem. However, every time you do need an emergency stop, you might be adjusting your brakes because they might come all the way to your grip suddenly, or it might not offer enough stopping power unless if they're adjusted accurately. There's nothing wrong with them. You just got to adjust them throughout their lives, and then when the pad gets low, you change the pad out. Now that'll bring me over here to some hydraulic disc brakes. Now these are unfamiliar brand, a generic brand name on these hydraulic brakes. No adjustments here, no adjustments down there to adjust the brakes. They work, the pad thins out and we replace it. That's just about it. Pros and cons for each. These are less expensive. These are more expensive, being hydraulic brakes. However, in the long run, if you're bringing it to a mechanic all the time, you might for adjustments, you might add up that money pretty quick. The con on these is if you do get this brake wire, the hydraulic brake line caught on something and it pulls out, you're looking at a brake overhaul, and it's not exactly easy to change your brakes out, put the wire back on, run the fluid through there, get all the air out there. It's a little bit more complicated if something like that does go wrong. But if the brakes haven't been damaged in any way, they don't need any adjustment, and they're very easy to do. 3,000 miles is when I last did my brakes. That'll depend on how you ride. This part's going to be about suspension. Depending on your use, you may or may not want suspension at all. This weighs 35 pounds. One of the things that keeps it so light is that there's no coil springs in it, no extra suspension on here. What it does though is it's now a stiff bike, which means it's very connected to the road. If you're a hard pedaling commuter and stuff, you might really appreciate that kind of ride. If you're taking turns fast, taking turns tight, and whipping in and out of traffic, you might not want your bike wallowing up and down while you're counting on it to hold firm as you're leaning left and leaning right. So that is a no suspension bike. Bikes that have just a front fork suspension. Now this front fork suspension will alleviate a lot of any pain you get through your wrist and through your arms and your elbows. It'll help you steer in most conditions. Like if you hit a pothole and it tries to throw you in a different way, the suspension absorbs it. It is common. Front suspension fork is probably the most common setup on a bike we see. And if you're lucky enough to be tall enough, then a lot of times you can fit a suspension seat post in here. Now, a suspension seat post doesn't add any performance whatsoever to the bike, but it does add comfort to you, to the rider. Right in there, and as you can see, it takes up some space, so we got to raise up the seat a little bit. And if the seat height is a big concern, you might not be able to use one of these. But if you can, it's a good way. $40 to $200, somewhere in those range for a suspension seat post. It's a good way to add the comfort without going full suspension. However, full suspension is not necessarily on a ton of expensive bikes anymore. You can buy bikes that are, right now I think this one goes for $12.99, the Free Sky, and here's a full suspension bike. We don't have the top end of rear suspension. We don't have the top end of front fork, but as you can see, it compresses, and when you go over bumps, it'll add some comfort. And it'll add a little bit of performance too, but it's not a high-end shock system. It's basically for comfort. More on the higher end side is things like inverted front forks, which I don't want to explain too much about that, but this is a regular front fork where it kind of goes into that tube there, and then here is an inverted front fork where the tube is actually down here and it goes up into the fork. It adds some stiffness and some performance. We have an air shock here. Everything else I've showed you to this point has been a coil shock. Those aren't as adjustable or fine-tuned. The air shock, we put a pump on it. We can put it to anybody's weight, anywhere from probably 50, 60, 80 pound rider, all the way up to a 300, 350 pound rider maybe. Some of these air shocks, though, do have a limit. So perhaps if you're a larger rider, maybe you want to look for a steel coil shock, which will also be very supple and very nice, and maybe not as adjustable, fine-tuned as the air shock, but it'll definitely hold up more weight. I brought this bike over here specifically. This is one of our friend's bikes here, and we have a front suspension fork. We have a rear air shock. He also has gone so far to add a connect rear shock here, which is kind of on the higher end of seat post shocks here. And then something that a lot of people don't know exists is this is a front shock built into your neck. And well, as the owner of this bike says, like all these shocks, these bigger shocks, they take out all the big bumps and all the big hits that you get when you're off-roading or going over curves or whatever. And then this the neck shock, as well as the seat shock post, take out a lot of the little bumps, like a lot of the rattles and things like that. He says it's like riding on a cloud, and I've ridden it for a few miles, and it is true. We can throw your money at anything, but there's a lot of shocks on this bike. All right, real quick, here is a coil shock. It's a steel coil shock, and so the shock itself is rated for up to 800 pounds, and that's why I'm saying, like, if you're a bigger person, coil shock made out of steel might be the thing for you, if that's what you want from comfort, as well as performance. We're going to talk about safety next. We're going to talk about the lighting systems on these bikes. Some of them are lit up like Christmas trees, and some of them are dark. This is our 35-pound Van Powers bike. It does not have a single light on it. It doesn't have a headlight, it doesn't have a rear light, it doesn't have flashing lights, turn signals, anything like that. You're going to need to buy another kit for it. The headlight and a rear light aren't expensive. They're really easy to add on, but they're not integrated into the bike. We have a bike that is very well lit. I'm going to turn the lights on. It's got an integrated front headlight, but I'm going to show you the rear here. We've got 3 lights. We got a triangle of lights, and if you know anything about depth perception, the more items there are for you to see, the easier it is for cars or other commuters to see how far away you are in the dark. Look, we got a turn signal. We're going left. Isn't that amazing? Now, let's go right. So you can have turn signals on a bike as well. I really think it's neat. This bike doesn't do it, but when they set up the turn signals to also work as emergency flashers, I think that is neat. I know Electric does that, and there's a couple other brands that does it as well. Real quick, here is those emergency lights I was talking about. This is Electric's bike. You hold both the turn signals down and you activate that. Double. I think if you're caught out in, like if you're a commuter, you're caught out in fog, caught out in the rain, that is very, maybe even more useful than having turn signals on it, in my mind. These are just my opinions. Again, take them with a grain of salt. Bikes are different. They're built for different purposes, and that includes the lighting. It also includes, I'm going to briefly touch on this, but it also includes fenders. Here is a bike with a fender. Here is a bike with no fender. Again, that's a 35-pound bike, so they're not adding a lot of stuff to it to make it light, obviously, but your fenders are going to keep debris from getting on your work clothes and maybe pebbles getting shot in your face as you're turning or whatever. Fenders are nice. They're more on a comfort side of safety things, but I do believe they add some safety, because if you get wet and cold from the water splashing up, then you're going to have a terrible ride and you're not going to be that focused on what you're doing. Move on from there. Just going to talk about racks real quick. Not that racks have anything to do with the safety of the bike, but certain racks are safer to do certain things than others. This is going to hold 50 to 60 pounds. It's not going to hold much more. You could probably put a baby seat on there, but as soon as your baby toddler hits 30, 35 pounds, you're done. On the other hand, you've got a bike like this Electric here. You have some that where the rear rack is actually welded in, and they go beyond this, but this is a pretty stout 150 pounds it'll hold. They sell a buddy kit. You got a seat, pegs you put on this bike, and you can up to 150 pounds. So you're talking more than a toddler, more than a baby. You're talking a young adult or a petite adult. So that is a consideration if you're going to be carrying a baby seat or hauling stuff or want to carry a buddy or a friend or a date along with you. That's going to be safer than a non-welded on rack. The next thing we're going to touch on is security. Here's a bike over here that has absolutely no security whatsoever. You walk right up to it, turn it on, ride away. No key, no code, no nothing at all. This is another bike from the same manufacturer, and it has very minimal security as well. However, you can't turn it on if you don't have the screen with it. It's a removable screen here. I'll just show you. It's from Mach Wheel. A little brand advertisement there. Whoa, Mach Wheel. So nobody's going to start your bike up and ride it away if you have this. And well, if they steal your bike and it doesn't have that, they got to go out and spend for a new screen. This is interesting. It doesn't have too much in the way of security. However, the hub locks when it's not in use, so you can't ride it away. Somebody would have to lift this up and carry it away. Something a little bit more advanced here. Here is the FreeSky Nova. So you can set it to any number you want, but here is a 4-digit code. Lets you in the bike. There we go. We got it set at 1212, and boom, we're in the bike, and now we can ride it. So there's one thing that can help do a little bit of security. This bike also comes with these, I'm not sure if they're NFC chips. There seem to be a QR code on here, but you wave these over the screen, and it'll wake up the screen as well. Here is a Velotric Fold Plus. This bike has Apple Find My app. So this will link up with your Apple phone, and you can find your bike wherever it's at, if it's close to a cell tower, I think, something like that. So that is a tracker on your bike. That is another approach to security of your bike. Nobody's going to steal your bike if they know they'll find it in your garage or your basement or wherever. All right, I'm going to give an honorable mention to the Segway Safari. It's a bike we normally have on the floor here. We sold it off as a floor model the other day to somebody who needed the bike that moment. So it has Bluetooth connectivity to your phone. When you walk up to the bike, it will unlock the locking hub. And when you walk away from your bike, it'll lock the locking hub. It also has a motion sensor. You wiggle the bike and it gives a chirp. You wiggle it again, it gives a louder chirp and starts going off. There's other security features in there as well as Apple Find Mine. And you can lock the bike with a code, I believe. And so there's different ways to secure that bike. Talking a little bit more about security, you can invest a lot in locks. We'll show you a couple of heavy duty locks here. You know, if you're a commuter and you live, if you go on the train to work, if you're parking your bike at a bike rack for 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, this is the kind of thing where, just listen, I'm gonna scare the dog. They're heavy locks. I would just leave them at the train station. Lock it up to the bike rack there, bring your bike up there, lock it there, go home, leave it there. Guys going out to eat, guys going downtown Batavia here for a nice night. There are simple locks, very simple locks. Most of the time when your bike gets stolen, it's a crime of opportunity because you've left it unlocked and you turned your back. Professional thief is going to beat any lock if you give them enough time, in my opinion. The average thief is not a professional, just some dude who sees your bike sitting there and he gets on it because he thinks it'll be fun to ride your bike for 20 minutes. We have motion alarms that are just kind of generic. They zip tie to your bike, but if you have it hidden away, underneath your seat or something like that. Anybody tries to mess with your bike, it starts going off right away. It's a very inexpensive way to get a little bit of security. All right, next we're gonna talk about some transportation here. I'm gonna start with this one. This one's one of our better sellers here. This is the Hollywood Destination. I think one of the bigger sellers is this. It's a ramp, goes on right there, and you can wheel your bike up there. And there's other ones out there that have ramps and easier ways than lifting your e-bike up onto the rack. But our next step up here is this rack, and this would be the Hollywood Sport Rider. It's actually less expensive. I won't say it's a step up, but here you go. It's a different kind of approach. You put your bike on here, and then these hooks come down on the frame. And again, you might need one of these crossbars if you have a step through so that it can lock your bike down. These are very secure. They hold a little bit more weight. I believe this one's rated about 20 pounds more per bike than this one is. They fold up against the car, tuck nicely out of the way. They fold away from the car so you can open up your hatch and get into it, or the bed of your truck. All right, alternatively, you can get yourself a folding bike. Here's the very popular electric XP4. It folds up just like you see it here. We got the handlebars bent over and it folds in half. Now you can fit this in the trunk of a small car, maybe even the back seat. Here is a folding trike. It doesn't necessarily make it any easier to lift up or fit in your car, but it can. You know, it might make the difference here that the folding trike here can fold. But they do make racks that fit trikes. There's an adapter for this rack here, the Hollywood Sport Rider, that will make it hold one bike as well as one trike, and it works pretty well. It is huge though. It comes off your car like maybe a good 5-6 feet. So you do have to understand what you're doing as you're driving around with this, backing up and things like that. Keep that in mind. There's different approaches to this. If you want a huge bike, you're gonna need a huge rack. If you don't need that, then well, maybe a folder will fit your purposes and maybe make it easier for you and more convenient. All right, everybody, right now I'm gonna start talking about smart shopping here. All right, local bike shops versus buying online. There's very few advantages to not buying it through a local bike shop. You can save yourself some money on assembly or things like that. However, if you're at home, you don't have a wall of parts to replace broken parts, bent discs, bent forks. Your local bike shop is here to support you. They want you happy so that you come back and you tell your friends, go buy at that shop because they treat you very well. I know I work at a shop, so take it with a grain of salt, but we fix the bike before we call you up and tell you your bike's ready to be picked up. If you're building it in your garage and you have a problem, you're going to have to do all the legwork. You're going to have to call your company. You're going to have to submit warranty claims. They're going to have to ship you new parts. Your local bike shop probably has a lot of the parts already there. You will get your bike quicker. That's one of the advantages. Your local bike shop also has plenty of bikes on the floor for you to try. So you can try to figure out if you care about fat tires or skinnier tires or class 1 bikes versus class 2 and 3 bikes. It is a fitment issue too. A bike might say it's got a 19-inch top tube and that's what generally fits you, but the head angle and the seat tube angle might be different than what you're used to. So that might feel different and change the reach and the way the bike handles. So a test ride is almost non-negotiable in my mind. I want to try something before I buy it, which is something you cannot do online, obviously. You can look at a bunch of reviews and look at a bunch of specs. And granted, most e-bikes are a lot of fun and you probably won't be disappointed, but perhaps you could have bought something that fits you a little bit better, that pedals a little bit better. Perhaps, as it was in my case, I came in here knowing I wanted a 750 watt motor. I tried a 500 watt motor and I appreciated what that did for me. I own a couple of 500 watt motor bikes now, a mid-drive as well as a hub drive, but I also own other bikes too. Lucky to work at a bike shop, by the way. But there are different approaches to this. We've explained motor positions and dual motors and mid drives and hub drives and things like that. But you won't know the difference between a cadence sensor and a torque sensor from me sitting here explaining it to you. You'll have an idea of it, but you really won't know whether or not you care about it unless if you try it. Trying it is a big deal, and we suggest you try a bike before you buy it. If it doesn't fit you, you're not going to be excited to ride it. If it doesn't excite you when you ride it, of course you won't be excited to ride it. So if you try a bike, you kind of know what you're getting into before you get it home. All right, so not all bikes are built the same. Not all brands are built the same. Some of these companies, they open up for a little bit, they sell off their stock and they disappear. Some of these companies are in it for the long haul and they revamp their bikes every year, every other year, change their paint schemes, and they're committed to making e-bikes. There are companies that have been around for a long time that have lesser customer service. There are companies that have been around for a short time that have wonderful customer service. You're not going to know, we touched this on this before, but you're not going to know. Do your research, look at the reviews, look at how specifically their customer service went. And if you can't find that, I wouldn't buy it. I mean, it might have all the specs in the world you want. It might have a 10,000 watt motor and 2 reverse gears or something, and you need that. And that's fine, you need that. But if you don't know the brand, and if nobody else knows the brand, you're taking a big chance with your money, especially without test riding it. You're stabbing in the dark, and that's not necessarily what I would do with $1,000, $2,000 and beyond bikes. The last thing I'm going to touch on is just having an open mind. There's different styles of bikes here. I've got a few right here. They feel different, they ride different. And you might come into our store thinking you know exactly what you want, and that's fine, and you know yourself the best. However, it doesn't hurt to try something you don't think you might not want. I'm gonna bring this bike to the forefront here. This is an EMA Big Sur Sport. It is a 20-inch fat tire. A lot of people come in here and they're like, I don't want a fat tire. I don't want a fat tire. They don't like the way it looks. They don't like the way, basically it looks. It looks intimidating to some smaller people, I think. It also doesn't look like a traditional bike that you've been used to your whole life, perhaps. However, the 20-inch tire ends up being a favorite of many of our shoppers. Your center of gravity is lower, or the 4-inch wide tire is a little bit more stable. It's not as nimble, but it means it's more stable. And then we get a lot of people who are perhaps on the smaller side, the shorter side. They appreciate this bike. They feel closer to the ground on it, and before you know it, they're fat tire fans. However, obviously not everybody likes them, and you don't have to like them. I'm not requiring anybody to like them. They're all got their pros and cons. So just trying out different styles is going to make you a smarter shopper. You can at least eliminate the fact, oh no, I don't like 26-inch fat tires. Or I love 26-inch fat tires. You know what? You don't know until you try it. It's really nice to come down to a shop like BOJ-E-BIKES here in Batavia. Here's a little plug for us. But we've got generally 35, 50, 60 bikes on the floor to try. And if you want to try a reverse trike, we could let you try a reverse trike. If you want to try this cargo hauler that's nearly 8 feet long, give it a try. The cargo hauler feels great. You don't notice that extra. For the most part, you don't notice that extra stuff behind you. We've got full suspension bikes over here. We've even got some clearance bikes that you might want to try because they're a good deal. But there is no one bike that's going to be right for everybody. So try them out, give them a try. And I think that's the best advantage of buying through a local bike shop or even just visiting a local bike shop. Anyway, hopefully this little tidbit, again, these are our opinions, my coworkers' opinions. We've just added them up together. So if you think I said something wrong, leave a comment and then maybe we can correct it or debate it or whatever else. That might be fun, might not be. But we're down here, guys. We're in Batavia, Illinois, and you've got a local bike shop probably near you too as well to try out. Anyway, on a final note, I'm gonna say that all these e-bikes in here, they're fun. If you like them, you'll probably enjoy it for a long time. There's not really a wrong decision you can make. If it fits you and it puts a smile on your face, you're gonna enjoy it. So whether or not you're concerned over this one having slightly better specs or slightly worse specs or whatever, we really think it's more about the ride. So give it a try. Give it a try. That's all I ask. Bye, guys.